Hi everyone! Today we're going to analyze a very nice attacking game by current world champion Magnus Carlsen. And this game is also somewhat special because this is going to be one of the last games that Magnus Carlsen is going to play as a world champion because he decided not to defend his world championship title against challenger Ian Nepomniachtchi. And I really like this game because it shows Magnus Carlsen's style, which is very clear cut. He normally doesn't rush, simply improves his pieces and then gets a winning position. So he makes it look so easy, but it is not because there's only one Magnus Carlsen. So let's start analyzing this game. Magnus played in his home country against Levi Andri Talaksen, and Magnus started the game with the move e4, and after e5 and knight to f3, knight to c6, and bishop to b5. This is one of the many ways on which white can play. Here we get a Ruy Lopez or a Spanish game. And in this position, black played the move a6. Here, white played the move bishop to a4. We definitely have a lot of possible moves here. Taking on c6 is actually a possible move. Maybe an important move to know here for black is that black has to stay with the d pawn in this case, because the idea is that after taking on e5, which is not a good move for white, black can play the move queen to d4 with a fork on the knight and the pawn, and black is getting the pawn back and getting a very good position. But taking on c6 is possible. Taking on e5 later on is not a good idea, but bishop to a4 is even more common, keeping the tension. And here black played the move knight to f6. Again, another very common move, putting pressure on the pawn e4. Here white could play the move d3, but castling is a bit more flexible. Even though it involves a pawn sacrifice, black might take the pawn e4, but bishop to e7, which was played in the game, is a bit more common. In any case, let's briefly check the main ideas after taking on e4. Here, white could play the move rook to e1, but even more ambitious is to go d4. And we can already see that white is getting some serious advantage in development, trying to open the position. So here in this position, b5 is a common move, and after bishop to b3, here black normally gives the pawn back by playing the move d5, because taking on d4 is already quite dangerous, since after rook to e1, we see that this knight on e4 is pinned, and black still has to castle, so the king on e8 is not standing very well there. So taking on e4 is possible. Black will normally give the pawn back, but playing bishop to e7 is also very common, very natural. Black simply wants to castle, and here in this position, Magnus played the move d3, rook to e1, defending the pawn e4 is more common, but Magnus very often doesn't play the main lines to avoid being prepared, particularly against a weaker opponent, as it is in this case. Here Magnus' opponent is much weaker, so Magnus simply wants to outplay the opponent over the board and not by preparing a long opening line. So here, after b5 and bishop to b3, black castled, so the position looks very quiet so far. Here white played the move a4, which is a typical idea in the Ruy Lopez. Since black played the move b5, now white wants to get some counterplay against this pawn. Taking on b5 is a big threat here because the pawn a6 would be pinned in this current position. That's why here black played the move bishop to e7. b4 is also possible, but bishop to b7 also makes a lot of sense, developing the bishop. And now if white takes on b5, black will simply capture back with the pawn. So here white normally has to develop the pieces on the king side, because we see that black is underdeveloped on that side of the board. And here white played the move knight b to d2. And this is a very common way to develop the knight in the Ruy Lopez. Instead of developing the knight to c3, which might look a bit more active, here white has the extra option of playing c3 and d4. And as we'll see, this knight on d2 might go towards the king side. So knight b to d2 might look like a passive move, but white has a lot of concrete ideas behind that move. So here black played the move d6, and now Magnus played c3, one idea being to prepare the move d4. That's why here black played another typical idea in the Ruy Lopez, which is knight to a5, attacking the bishop, and after bishop to c2, playing the move c5. So even though this doesn't strictly stop the move d4, because here white could play the move d4, now black might have ideas to take on d4, for example with the c pawn, and this would open the c file. We see that in this position, white is a bit underdeveloped. So in general, opening up the position might be a bit too hasty here. That's why here Magnus played the move rook to e1. First of all, it overprotects the pawn e4 if we ever play d4. But in this particular position, the main idea is to give the square for the knight. So the f1 square now will be available for the knight. And this knight on f1 might later on come to g3. And spoiler alert, one might have a lot of attacking chances. So here black played the move rook to e8. And after knight to f1, queen to c7, and knight to g3, we still get a fairly standard position in the Ruy Lopez. And here black played the move bishop to f8. And here one idea is to play g6 and bishop to g7. So here white played a very interesting move, bishop to g5, playing against this plan. So here g6 is not possible because the knight on f6 would be hanging. And here playing a move like h6 is actually quite bad from a positional point of view, because after white takes on f6, we see how black gets a lot of weak squares, and these knights are going to be just very powerful. For example, here after knight to h4, this f5 square is going to be very good for white's pieces. The queen might also come to h5, so this position is already crashing for white. So after bishop to g5, black played the move knight to d7, and here white played a very interesting move, h4. White is simply trying to gain space on the king side, and this pawn is actually going to be an attacking unit for white, so white might have ideas to push h4 and maybe even h6. White is simply gaining space on the king side, and here black played the move d5, which makes sense. Now black will try to play on the other side of the board. b4 is also another interesting idea for black, so black has more pieces on the queen side, so black might try to get play there, but getting play on the center also makes a lot of sense. So far, both sides are playing very decent chess. So here Magnus played h5, black captured on e4, and after pawn takes e4. Here in this position, it is hard to blame black for the move f6, which was played. But after this move, black's king might be a bit more exposed. We see how this diagonal has been weakened. And in this position, moving the kingside pawns is normally dangerous for black because black's king might become more exposed. So after a move like f6, g6 is normally going to be riskier because black's pawns are going to be more loose. So f6 is actually a move that already gave Magnus a strong advantage, and Magnus simply didn't forgive black's slight inaccuracy. So in this position, black had to play on the queen side. Black had many options. For example, c4 was an idea which was played in the game, but only after playing f6. One idea being to play knight to c5 and then invade with the knight on b3. Another idea, as we discussed, was to play b4, or even the move knight to c4 here was an interesting alternative. Besides putting pressure on b2, another main idea is that the knight might come back to d6, and this knight there might cover this f5 square, which is a square that white will normally use to place a knight there. So this idea of going knight to c4 and d6 was also an interesting try. And after f6, here white simply played bishop to e3, and now black played the move c4. Going knight to c4 in this position was already not useful because after bishop to b3, we see how this knight is now pinned. So black is already having problems. For example, after king to h8, white might simply take on c4, and then knight to d2 is a very simple idea, just going for this pawn. So here black played c4, which makes sense. Black will play on the queen side. And here Magnus took on b5, and after pawn takes b5, knight to h4. So in the next moves we'll see how Magnus simply places the pieces on the right squares after knight to c5, queen to g4, just bringing more pieces to the king side. And here black played the move knight a to b3, attacking the rook. Here Magnus simply traded rooks. Magnus doesn't care about giving the a file because he's confident that his attack on the king side is going to be stronger. So here after the move knight g to f5, white is simply piling up pieces to attack black's king. This bishop on e3 might also be ready to attack. For example, bishop to h6 might be an idea since the pawn on g7 is pinned. And by the way, if you want to know more about attacking, you might want to check my video about the most important principle to attack in chess after watching this video, because amazingly this position is already much better, if not winning for white. So here black tried bishop to c8, pinning this knight on f5, and here in this position, white could have tried the move h6, just going for the throat. And this is actually another instructive moment because this is probably a move that other attacking players might play, but Magnus is a player who loves harmony in his pieces and improved the last piece that was not doing a lot, which is the rook on e1. So here white played the move rook to d1. Now this rook will be definitely more active on the file. But I just want to mention that the move h6 was already quite interesting because after the move g6, white might have ideas to sacrifice a knight and then start attacking black's king and also collecting some pawns. This was also a good alternative for white. But again, Magnus normally doesn't like to rush, and he first places the pieces on their ideal squares before finishing his opponent off. So here the move rook to d1 is even simpler, and now white might have this idea of playing h6 later on. Here in this position, black tried knight to e6, overprotecting the pawn on g7, and after bishop takes, pawn takes, here white played another quiet move, king to h2. The king is going to be safer here. If the rook on d1 ever leaves the first rank, the king is not going to be attacked on the first rank, so the king on h2 is actually quite safe. Here black tried rook to a2, and after rook to d2, defending the pawn. Again, Magnus doesn't want to rush. Here black played the move b4, and in this position, white played the move c4. Magnus didn't want to give counterplay after pawn takes and bishop takes. This would activate the bishop. And instead, Magnus decided to play c4, which is a pawn sacrifice, but Magnus understands the position and knows that his attack is going to be worth much more than a pawn. So after queen takes, here Magnus played a forcing continuation after knight to h6, giving a check, the pawn on g7 is pinned, king to h8 is the only move, and here Magnus played the very brilliant knight to g6, giving a check, pawn takes is the only move, and now Magnus followed up with another forcing move, knight to f7, giving a check, black tried king to g8, if king to h7, after pawn takes, and king to g8, white is simply giving a checkmate after king to h5 and queen to h7 or queen to h8. That's why black tried king to g8, and after queen takes, we get this position on which black is a piece up, but amazingly, black doesn't have any way to defend. And this is again another very instructive position because even though the position might be very tactical, there's one very simple idea that white has, which black cannot prevent, which is to go h6 and then h7. There's the idea to give a checkmate, but also to promote the pawn. So black is simply helpless against this idea. For example, if black plays queen to c7, attacking the knight on f7, white can still play the move h6, and after queen takes, white has the intermediate move h7 giving a check, and after king to h8, queen takes, white simply gets a lot of material and still a very strong attack. So this position is already hopeless for black. There was one interesting try for black, which is to go knight to f4, because here black is attacking the queen, but taking on f4 would actually be very bad because now here black can take on f7. But here white had the move knight to h6, and after king to h8, now black can simply take on f4, and now we see the idea of placing the rook on the d file, because now white has ideas to play rook to d8, attacking black's king. So this is also a winning position for white. Instead, black tried the very creative move rook to a7, but this still didn't work because white can capture the rook on a7, but the idea is to go knight to f4, now attacking the queen and planning to take the knight on f7, but here Magnus played knight to h6, and after king to h8, here white definitely has a lot of ideas. For example, queen to e8, trying to attack black's king was definitely possible, but again Magnus went for the crystal clear continuation and played the move queen to f7. This simply forces the exchange of queen because white has an idea to play queen to g8, giving a checkmate, or capturing the queen on c4. And after the trade, white simply gets a technically winning position, white is an exchange up, and black doesn't have anything in return. And for a world champion, converting these positions is pretty much trivial. So here after king to g8, knight to d6, bishop to e6, g3, black got a pawn, but this knight on h5 is totally out of the game. And here after bishop to c5, white will get another pawn, and the game ended after a few moves, g6, knight to b7, bishop to h6, rook to d8, king to f7, bishop takes b4, and after bishop to c1, here Magnus played a nice move to finish the game, rook to d1, attacking the bishop, and here black resigned. The point being that after bishop takes, white has this fork with knight to d8, and there's no way to avoid losing more material. For example, after king to e8, white will simply capture the bishop, and white is already having a lot of extra material, so the position is totally hopeless for black. So I hope that you enjoyed the game. Remember, if you want to know more about how to attack correctly, you might want to check my video about it. I also have a very nice attacking game where Anish Giri completely demolishes Indian prodigy Gukesh that you might also want to check. And please subscribe to my channel if you want to get notified about future videos that I upload. So that's it for now. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next video.